All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for clicking in and joining us today. If you're watching this, we are a panel of biologists, biology faculty at Seattle Pacific University. And you may have heard that Seattle Pacific recently required returning students this fall to be vaccinated for COVID-19. A number of universities across the country and in the state have made this decision to require COVID vaccination. Some of the schools down the road from us, like University of Washington and Seattle University, other schools like Wazoo and Whitworth. So many schools in the state and across the country are making this decision. I also know, and I've been hearing that a number of folks have some hesitancy about getting the vaccine, with a lot of questions about what is COVID and how's the vaccine work and is it safe? Now, I am a professor of biology at Seattle Pacific, but to be honest with you, I'm not an expert in terms of viruses or immune systems or even genetics. My area of biology is ecology. I'm a wildlife biologist. I study big furry things. So if you got a question about what to do about rogue deer taking over your neighborhood, I can handle that one. That's my area. But I'm not an expert in many of these other places. I've been trained in biology, so I know a decent amount, but certainly I wouldn't be considered an expert in this field. Now, I have the benefit of just having the office down the hall of a number of folks at Seattle Pacific who are experts in this field, who are experts in things like virology, immunology, and genetics. So one of the perks of my job is I can just knock on their door and ask them the tough questions, and they're always willing to answer them for me. So we thought it might be beneficial to have a little panel discussion where I can ask many of these questions that I've had to my colleagues who really know a lot about this, and then let you listen in so you can hear some of the things that we've been discussing. So I've invited 3 biology faculty members here at Seattle Pacific to join us on the panel discussion today. We have Dr. Jennifer Tenlin. Jenny Tenlin got her PhD in molecular and cellular biology at the University of Washington. At Seattle Pacific, she teaches genetics and developmental biology, and she's currently the co-chair of our biology department. Dr. Charlotte Pratt is also joining us today. She's got her PhD in biochemistry from Duke University, and she's been teaching immunology for almost 20 years. She's also the author of a couple of different biochemistry textbooks. And we're also joined by Dr. Tracy Delgado. Tracy got her PhD in virology from the University of Washington. At Seattle Pacific, she teaches genetics, cellular biology, and she's developing a class in medical virology, which frankly, I kind of want to take. And Tracy's also the author. She's given a TED Talk on viral therapy. So my colleagues really know a lot about these types of topics. And so I thought we'd start with some questions. And we're going to start with Professor Delgado. And I was wondering, as an expert in viruses, could you tell us a little bit about how viruses work? And how is this virus maybe a little different from some of the other viruses out there? And then why is getting vaccinated relative to this virus? Why would you consider that important?
Yeah, for sure. Viruses are, as you may have heard, it can cause many different diseases, from the flu to the cold to fevers to chickenpox. I mean, you name it, they're involved in many diseases. Viruses are more like parasites. They take over our body, and they are just trying to replicate and survive in the sense of making more copies of themselves. But in the midst of that, they cause really severe disease, especially when our body has never encountered them before. And so they're made of a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat, which is why it's good to wash your hands with detergent, because it breaks down that fatty layer that makes them infectious. And they're also made of genetic material. And so when we think about, viruses and how they work and how our body responds to that, when you're encountering a new virus that your body's never seen before, your body will have to fight it a little bit more vigorously than a virus than they've seen before, just because it takes a while for our bodies to kind of learn how to fight these infections and intruders. And so when we think about like the common flu, we've seen that virus and it's changed over time, and our body continues to fight it. And so while it can be really severe in some cases, we do see it pretty often. But when we look at this new virus, this novel coronavirus, it's a new coronavirus that hasn't been around in our bodies and infections. And so it can cause more severe disease than, say, the flu. And unfortunately, because of things like that, it makes it harder to fight it and can lead to more hospitalizations and even deaths because we're not really sure how to fight this virus yet medically until vaccination. And then once you get the vaccine, that's important because then, that vaccine will actually provide you ways for your body to learn how to protect itself.
Excellent. Thank you. So I was wondering, it sounds like, especially because our body just has not seen this one before, it sounds like the ante's been upped a little bit in terms of how severe this is. So do you think getting vaccinated is important against a virus like this, or should we just trust our immune system to take care of it?
I mean, I think it's really important. You just don't know how your body is going to respond. With COVID-19, you can have really mild infection, you can have really severe infection. And as scientists, we're still trying to figure out why is it that some people get severe disease and some people don't. We see that in both healthy people who are young, and we see it in, elderly populations where we know their immune system's not as strong. So it makes more sense that in those cases, they'll have more severe disease. But with the people who are young, there are people who have severe disease, and we haven't figured out exactly why is it that some young people get hit with severe disease and others have mild infection. And so because of that, it's really important to get vaccinated. Vaccination will prevent deaths. It's also a way to love your community. I see that as a Christian duty to love on the people around me, including the children and everybody else who can't get vaccinated yet. Being able to vaccinate myself protects others, just like what wearing a mask was. It was about protecting others and loving others. And then also knowing, God protects me, but he also gave us scientists and people who do medicine to help find solutions to health problems like COVID-19. And it's a way that God protects us. He gives us this knowledge, and it's important to use it because he's giving it to us and not ignore that. And so those are, things that I find to be important as a Christian is loving others, protecting myself and others, and using what God's given us, which is science and medicine, to help protect us as well.
Cool. Thanks very much. Professor Pratt, so it sounds like Professor Delgado gave us some good background in terms of how viruses work. And so now we've got this, vaccine that's out there. And I know a number of folks have questions about what's actually going on with a vaccination. And now you're an immunologist, so this is your world, right? So what's actually going on with this vaccine and our immune system, and how is that working? Because I know a lot of the questions surround basically what's going on with the vaccine.
So vaccines have been developed for dozens and dozens of viral and bacterial diseases. Each vaccine has unique ingredients that interact with the immune system in slightly different ways. For example, some vaccine components need to get inside cells so that they can sort of mimic a viral infection, a real viral infection. So your immune system sees something similar to the real thing. Some vaccines work really, really well. Some vaccines work okay, but they all work. And the goal for all of them is to prevent illness, prevent deaths. The coronavirus vaccines use a couple different molecular systems, but they all introduce a portion of the virus, which is a triangular protein called the spike protein, which is unique to that virus, that gets introduced into your body so that your immune system can see it and respond to it. Vaccines are also formulated to irritate the tissue near the injection site, which is why your arm feels sore after the shot. But that inflammation is necessary to make sure that your white blood cells will notice the vaccine and respond to it before it breaks down and gets washed away. So the coronavirus vaccines cannot cause an illness because they don't include the whole virus, just a piece of it for your immune system to see. Some of the immune system cells that respond to the spike protein are B cells that make antibodies, and those antibodies continue to circulate in your blood for months, maybe longer. We don't really know the long-term view. But some of the cells that respond to the spike protein are B cells and T cells that become memory cells. And memory cells basically just chill for years and years, but they can be woken up again and spring back into action if the spike protein or a virus carrying the spike protein ever enters your body again. So memory cells, more than just antibodies, are really the key to how vaccines work. The memory cells work so well and so fast that if the virus does get in, it is squelched right away before it makes you sick and before you can pass the virus on to anybody else. So a vaccine is not some kind of magic force field that keeps the virus out of your body, but it does make sure that if the virus does get in, you won't get sick, you won't be able to pass on the infection.
All right. Now, okay, we've got viruses, and now we've got these vaccines, and it sounds like, Professor Delgado, when you were telling us about this, we've got fats, but we've also got some other stuff in there. We've got some proteins, we've got some genetic material in there too. And I know that we've got different vaccines that are floating out there. We've heard that some of these include genetic material, messenger RNA, mRNA. And so I want to turn to our geneticist, Professor Tenlin. Could you tell us a little bit about knowing that some of these vaccines have genetic material in them, like this mRNA, but others are built a little bit different? Could you help parse that out for us a little bit? What's going on with this messenger RNA vaccines?
All right. Well, thank you. So Dr. Pratt mentioned that these coronaviruses contain spike protein, and those spike proteins are important for helping the virus gain entry into our cells. So what we really want to be able to do is train our immune system to know what those spike proteins look like. And the way we do that is to help our immune cells produce those spike proteins at kind of like a training wheel set, so that when the real deal comes into our body, they can recognize them. So several companies, Pfizer and Moderna, have developed this messenger RNA-based vaccine. Now, we all make messenger RNA. We all have DNA, which is our genetic blueprint. That DNA is transcribed into messenger RNA, and the messenger RNA provides the information to make protein. So in the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, you are being injected with messenger RNA that's specific to the spike protein of the coronavirus. And that's it. No other genetic material from the virus is coming along. You are not being injected with the entire virus. You're only being injected with the messenger RNA that's specific to the spike protein gene. So when that vaccine enters our body, those messenger RNAs are then incorporated, taken up by our immune system cells, and then that messenger RNA provides the blueprint to manufacture or translate the spike protein that are then displayed by the cells, and that allows our bodies to start making antibodies that recognize that. So when we get those mRNA vaccines, we are simply allowing our cells to make that one component of the virus. Now, Johnson & Johnson has made a different type of vaccine that operates on a similar principle, and these are DNA viral vector vaccines. So if you have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you are being injected with a harmless virus that is carrying the gene fragment, the DNA fragment that corresponds to or provides the blueprint for making the coronavirus spike protein. Those adenoviruses then carry that DNA fragment to your cells, and then that provides the instruction for your cells to manufacture that particular spike protein. So both of these are simply providing the genetic component of a single protein that our body can then use to train itself to how to recognize those proteins in the future should we be infected.
Okay, I got a couple follow-up questions here for you, Professor Tenlin. So, it sounds like there's mRNA in the Pfizer Moderna vaccines, and it sounds as if there's some DNA encoded for the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. Does that change our genetics? When we get injected with a vaccine, is that changing our genetic code?
Absolutely not. So when these, whether the DNA or the messenger RNA are incorporated into our cells, they're simply used to provide that blueprint instruction to make protein. And in fact, with the mRNA vaccine, the messenger RNA is degraded by natural processes within our cell after the proteins are made. So the messenger RNA goes away and is no longer present after translation occurs. So there's no trace of that genetic material present in our cells after a period of time. So none of our genetic material is being altered by either of these types of vaccines when they are injected into our body.
Excellent. Okay. One other question. I know there's been some discussion about the differences in terms of how the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, have been made versus how the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been made. Are there fetal tissues involved in any of these vaccines? Because that's something that I've been hearing out there as well.
Exactly. So with the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, absolutely no fetal tissues have ever been used in the manufacture of those vaccines. And as a Catholic, that's really important to me. And the Catholic Church has certainly advocated for the vaccination with Moderna and Pfizer for that reason. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is not in of itself made with fetal cells or fetal tissue. However, one component of the vaccine is grown in cells that were derived from cells taken from an aborted fetus 35 years ago. And so no new fetal cells have been introduced into that culture since then. So if there are concerns about using vaccines that are derived from fetal tissue, you may want to go with the vaccine produced by Moderna or Pfizer as opposed to the Johnson & Johnson. But the Johnson & Johnson, the core vaccine itself, is not incorporating fetal tissues.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that clarification. All right. Now, I think probably the biggest question that folks are having out there right now is these vaccines came out fast, right? These are new vaccines on the scene. So I'm going to go back to you, Professor Delgado. How do we know they're safe if they came out this fast? How do we have confidence that these things are safe for us?
Yeah, so safety is a big concern. I think a lot of people see this, COVID hit in early 2020, and by the end of 2020, we ended up having a vaccine, right? And so I understand the concerns of safety. I do want to mention no corners were cut in this process. It was sped up, but not in a way that impacted safety. So when you have a vaccine that's getting made, it could take, 5-10 years, depending on what's available and what's not available at that time. But interesting with the COVID-19 vaccines, there was a couple of reasons how it was able to be speed up so fast. And so these are just kind of some examples. One is the vaccine technology for mRNA vaccines been developed for 2 decades. Like it's been in development for 2 decades, and then we finally got to use it. So it's kind of ready to go as soon as we needed it. And we also saw this was an all hands on deck moment. Scientists all over the country were asked, stop doing your research. We all need to shift and do COVID-19 research and figure out a vaccine. So when you have that many amazing brains all working towards the same solution, things happen faster. And so this all hands on deck moment was through everything from the paperwork for the vaccines being put on the top of the list when it could take a year of waiting just for them to review your paperwork. Funding was not a problem, right? We had money that was ready to be available immediately to fund this. So you don't have to wait a year, 2-3 years for funding. Volunteers are ready to go for the same thing. It could take a year sometimes to get enough volunteers, but volunteers are ready to get in. And once the safety checks were the same, it just took, because volunteers are ready to go, we were able to do volunteer recruitment quickly. The safety checks were exactly the same, and if anything, more vigorous because more participants were included in these clinical trials than a typical vaccine trial would. And then we also were able to, scientists were able to do multiple clinical trials side by side simultaneously instead of separating them out. And so by doing so, increase the speed. Of course, COVID-19 rates were high, so it didn't take long to see that the vaccines were working compared to people who were not vaccinated getting and contracting the disease. And so because of all those kind of factors, we were able to see that this vaccine works and it was safe. All the data and checklist, as it moves from one program officer or I guess agency to another, got to the top of the list and they weren't going to wait. As soon as it got on their list, they're going to check all the safety and data and then move on. And everything else got pushed to the side, including other important things, but COVID was number one priority at this point. And that's why everything moved so fast. And again, we had way more data than we would have normally had in other clinical trials
Let me hit a couple of specific safety concerns that I've heard. So, there's kind of the big picture. Did it go too fast? And it sounds like there were no corners cut. It was just because so much resources and so many people were working on this that we were able to get, the technology developed. And it sounds like the technology was already developed even before COVID. It just kind of gave us our first chance to really use it. So that's great. But I've heard a couple of specific things. One thing that I've been hearing is folks are perhaps hesitant to take the vaccine because they're concerned that it may affect their fertility. So especially young women. Is there any truth to the idea that this vaccination may harm fertility for especially for young women?
Yeah, that started off as a rumor on social media, and it was based off of there was kind of this correlation of thinking of the placenta has a spike-like protein, and of course the vaccine is a spike protein. And so they thought, okay, then if you get the vaccine, it's going to attack the placenta and cause some sort of fertility problems. But that was just based off of kind of maybe a correlation, but it was never scientifically proven. Once they ended up doing the actual vaccine trials, they actually noticed miscarriage rates were higher in the ones that had the placebo, which was the non-vaccine, versus the vaccinated group didn't actually have like that same miscarriage. And then as more and more and more people got vaccinated past the clinical trials, we see that there's no change in fertility rates and miscarriages in a vaccinated versus the unvaccinated population. And so the data itself has been shown now that it's not causing that type of effect. And plenty of women are getting pregnant and plenty of women are getting vaccinated while pregnant. And again, it's going to be saving lives more than, at least so far, no data shows anything about having a negative effect on pregnancy.
So we've had enough cases now of folks getting vaccinated that we feel really confident. We can look at folks who are vaccinated, who aren't vaccinated, and we see no difference in terms of fertility. And now that we've gotten millions of people vaccinated, we've got a big enough number. So if that was a concern earlier, that just as data keep coming in and coming in and coming in, we can kind of put that myth to rest, huh?
Yeah.
I've also heard some concerns about blood clotting with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I believe there was a time when we paused the rollout of that vaccine to investigate potential blood clotting. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, that was good. They paused. Anytime safety is a possibility of being compromised, we want to pause. And that's just like we had our safety checks and we mentioned during the vaccine development. That was important. And what they found was that it wasn't really a significant increase in just a normal blood clot rates. If you look at the actual percentage, it's like 0.00004% or something of people who got vaccinated were getting blood clots, which was very, very small. If you actually look at the risk benefit assessment of, getting COVID versus getting blood clots from the vaccine versus COVID causing the blood clots, COVID is 10, times greater of blood clots than the vaccine. And so if you really want to prevent blood clots, you should actually get the vaccine to prevent the blood clots, because if not, you're going to have a higher risk of blood clots if you get COVID infection in real life. And so it is a precautionary thing to be careful with. And I actually recommend everybody who's gotten COVID to take baby aspirin to prevent blood clots, just to kind of, because they are at higher risk if they got infected with COVID.
Okay. All right. So it seems like fertility is not an issue with the vaccine. It seems like blood clots are not necessarily an issue. The vaccines, like COVID, is much more of a predictor of blood clots than the vaccine is. Then instead of like the specifics, I've also just heard that there have been many people who have died after getting the vaccine, that there have been, now we've recorded maybe thousands of deaths after getting the vaccine. Is that worrisome?
No, it's so the problem is that people are looking at just like people get vaccinated and people die, but they're not really thinking, they're not correlating that to COVID-19. They realize it's natural causes, right? So if you have a group of population of elderly, let's just say they're between 80 and 90, maybe, a certain percentage of them are expected to die within the next year, right? And so because they get vaccinated and then they die, they blame it on COVID. But they actually see the rate of death between certain age groups are the same with and without vaccination. So I think it's really easy to say, oh, someone got vaccinated and then they died 2 months later. And then they blame it on the vaccine. But really, it's like, no, if you look at the rates of death for that age population, it's the same with and without the vaccination.
Okay. So it's not that so there might be people dying after getting the vaccine, but it's not because they were dying because of the vaccine. It's
it's called correlation does not equal causation. Okay. It's a term we use in science, which says just because something increases due to something doesn't necessarily mean it's due to that something, which here is the COVID-19 vaccine.
All right. So if I get vaccinated and then win the lottery, I don't get to say that the vaccination is what caused me to win the lottery.
Exactly. Nice. You'll share the money with me though, right?
All right. Yeah, I'm on it. So, all right. Thank you so much for helping us tease that apart. I know vaccine safety is probably the biggest question that folks are really asking right now. And so just kind of having that information really, I think, helps us think through it. I want to end by going around the group again and just kind of asking you each the same question. So maybe we'll get a little more personal here. I want to know, have you gotten the vaccine? And if so, why did you? And are you recommending that other folks get the vaccine? Maybe are you even recommending it to young and healthy people, young and healthy friends and family? Are you recommending the vaccine to them as well? So Professor Pratt, can we come back to you and ask, have you gotten it? Are you recommending it?
I got vaccinated and it's 2 weeks past my last dose, so I am street legal.
Hey.
And I would encourage everyone to get vaccinated. The selfish part of me would say, I don't want to get COVID. It's much more deadly than the flu. And even if I don't die, I don't want to get long COVID, which is an illness that can last for months. Most importantly, though, I don't want to be the one who might have a mild infection who passes on the virus to someone else. I don't want to be the cause of anyone else anywhere who can't afford to stay home from work while they're sick. I don't want to give that to anyone else. And I think that's a Christian responsibility to look after our neighbors. I am my brother's keeper. I want to do everything I can to protect everyone, not just me.
Excellent. Thank you. Professor Tenlin, could you let us know, have you been vaccinated? Are you recommending it to others, even young, healthy folks?
Absolutely. I actually got my first dose 2 weeks ago, and I'm getting my second dose in 2 weeks. And I am really looking forward to being able to say I'm fully vaccinated. I will say my family has a long tradition of being very pro-vaccine. Both of my grandmothers lost relatives to the polio virus and to the Spanish flu, the influenza virus of 1918. And when the polio vaccine came out, my grandmother marched all 4 of my aunts and uncles and mother down to Tacoma, made sure that they were all vaccinated. And so vaccines save lives. And for me, especially, my dad is very high risk and his health is not good right now. And I am my parent primary caregiver. So if something happens to me, who's going to look after my parent? And I, as Dr. Pratt said, I don't want to be guilty of giving anything to my parent. That would be devastating to me. It would be devastating to my parent. My nephews, I have 2 nephews who are in their early 20s. They are both getting vaccinated, partly because their mother told them to, and they listen to their mother, and that's the way it should be. But we are all in this together. We are a community. We are not individual islands. What one person does affect everybody around us. And I think we are all responsible for looking out for one another.
Excellent. Thank you. And Professor Delgado, how about you? You've been vaccinated. Are you recommending it to others?
Definitely. I've already been fully vaccinated. I'm actually currently 36 weeks pregnant and expecting a baby very soon here. And I received the vaccine at 27 weeks pregnant and 30 weeks pregnant. And it was really important for me to get vaccinated because being pregnant makes you high risk for severe illness and death, including ventilation, ICU stays, compared to non-pregnant women. We also see that babies are born premature and that causes issues for them as well. So I wanted to protect my baby and myself. And I've met people who I know people who have had COVID while pregnant, and it's been rough, even to the point of like their baby being separated from them and having to stay in the hospital longer with, oxygen, supplemental oxygen, and baby goes home. And that was not something I wanted. I wanted to be sure I could protect myself, including also through breastfeeding is going to be important to continue to protect my infant afterwards. My husband's vaccinated, my 6-year-old and my baby that's coming will get vaccinated as soon as they're eligible. I'm recommending everyone to get vaccinated, whether you're healthy or not, because as I mentioned before, COVID can hit people differently. You just never know if you may end up with severe disease. And so that's a big push to get vaccinated, and also, of course, protecting others around you by getting vaccinated. So I protect
Excellent.
my sons until they can get vaccinated.
Yeah, I hear you. I've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they can, 4-year-old, not quite 5 yet. Got to get that right. And they, they can't get the vaccine yet. And so I too have been vaccinated as of a couple of days ago. I was 2 weeks post my second dose, so I'm good to go. Street legal, as Professor Pratt said. I like that. I'm going to use that. So what I heard in your answers there, I love that we've got a virologist and an immunologist and a geneticist. It sounds like the beginning of a joke, I think. But we've got you folks, like, you know what you're talking about, and you all were very eager to get the vaccine. You are all, as professors at Seattle Pacific, you would all identify as Christians, as people of faith. And it sounds to me as if this is an important step for you, in large part to protect others around you who might not be able to be protected. It sounds to me as if this is, part of our community here at SPU. So I mean, speaking personally, and I think this is true for all of you, I cannot wait to be back and teaching in the classroom the way that I had been doing for years and years before this past year. And if we can get our community vaccinated, then we can get back to doing class the way that we all love to do class, in person, on campus, together. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for answering my questions that I had here on Zoom. Thank you for always answering my questions when I knock on your door or shoot you an email. I really appreciate having colleagues who are so knowledgeable about such things. So for everybody who tuned in, I hope that was helpful as we covered some of the science behind what viruses are and what the vaccines do. What are some of the differences and similarities among the vaccines? And then just really covering ground to the point that these folks who are experts in the field believe these vaccines are safe and are recommending them to everybody that they can. So hopefully this was helpful and answered some of your questions. Thanks a lot. And thank you to each of the panelists for coming in and help answering our questions. Thanks so much.